The Galactic Academy was a marvel of interstellar cooperation, a floating hub of learning where species from across the cosmos gathered to exchange knowledge. Towering crystalline spires housed classrooms, their walls pulsing with faint bioluminescence, an architectural blend of a dozen civilizations. Among the students bustling through its vast corridors were the humans, recent newcomers to the intergalactic fold, yet already notorious. Humans, it seemed, had a reputation. Deathworlders, as the wider galaxy classified them, hailed from planets that were considered inhospitable, even lethal, to most intelligent life. Earth, their home, was a world of relentless chaos, roiling seas, unpredictable weather, and an ecosystem teeming with creatures evolved through brutal competition. The mere fact that humans thrived in such a place made them subjects of both fascination and wariness. Their ability to bond with creatures even more dangerous than themselves was the latest source of controversy. The debate had started innocently enough. Professor Zilv, a scholar of interspecies sociology, had proposed an exercise. Each student would bring an artifact or companion from their homeworld to share with the class, something that embodied a core aspect of their culture. The intention was to foster mutual understanding. But when the humans declared they would be bringing their pets, the proposal quickly devolved into panic. Among the many species attending the academy, few had experience with domesticated animals. Most civilized worlds had long eradicated their ecosystem's more aggressive elements, and the very concept of allowing non-sentient creatures to roam freely was met with disbelief. To many, the thought of voluntarily cohabiting with predators was akin to madness. The professor, though dubious, allowed the demonstration to proceed, if only to better understand this peculiar Deathworlder trait. The day of the presentation arrived, and anticipation hung thick in the air. The classroom, a grand amphitheater lined with floating platforms for species of varying physiologies, filled with students murmuring in uneasy anticipation. Zilv adjusted his shimmering sensory fronds, his equivalent of a nervous tick, as he observed the humans entering. First came Lieutenant Aaron Hayes, a military exchange student, his uniform pristine but marred by a wriggling ball of fur in his arms. The creature, a dog, Zilv recalled, seemed oddly eager, its tongue lolling from its mouth as it scanned the room. A few aliens instinctively recoiled. Following closely behind, Anya Petrova carried a smaller, sleek-furred quadruped with piercing green eyes. The feline regarded the gathered students with what could only be described as utter disinterest. Next came Kaido Mori, holding what Zilv at first mistook for a coiled nest of serpents, but was informed was a ball python. The realization that humans willingly coexisted with a species they classified as a snake nearly sent one student into convulsions. Then there was Nathan Carter, who strode in with a sizable avian perched on his shoulder. The creature, with its bright plumage and piercing gaze, let out a sharp cry, startling the entire amphitheater. "Don't mind Kiwi," Nathan said cheerfully. "She just likes attention." Murmurs of confusion spread. Attention? The bird sought recognition? This was all too much. Zilv ruffled his fronds and signaled for order. "Humans, I must clarify. These creatures are not trained for battle, nor are they for sustenance." Aaron chuckled. "What? No, sir. They're companions." "Pets." "Companions," a student from the Zlar species repeated, their translucent exoskeleton flickering with nervous color shifts. "You mean they do not serve any practical function?" "They serve plenty of functions," Anya interjected. "Emotional support, companionship, even security in some cases. But mostly they're just family." Silence. The concept of forming emotional bonds with lesser creatures was alien, literally, to most of the Academy's students. On their homeworlds, intelligence dictated status. The idea that Deathworlders would willingly share space, food, and even affection with non-sentient beings was unfathomable. Then the dog sneezed. A simple, harmless, involuntary sound. And yet, chaos erupted. A reptilian student shrieked, launching themselves behind a desk. The Zlar scrambled onto their hover platform, their entire body flashing bright yellow, their species' equivalent of sheer terror. The avian delegate from the Zhan Empire flared their wings in alarm, squawking in distress. Aaron, startled by the reaction, tightened his grip on his pet. Whoa, whoa, it's just a sneeze. Relax. Zilv sighed, rubbing his appendages together in exasperation. He had studied hundreds of species, documented countless cultural oddities, but this was unlike anything he had ever encountered. His thoughts were interrupted when the feline leapt gracefully from Anya's arms, landing effortlessly on the desk in front of him. For a long, tense moment, Zilv and the creature locked eyes. The feline blinked once slowly. Zilv's fronds rippled with unease. "What is it doing?" he asked warily. Anya smiled. "She likes you. I find that highly unlikely." "It's a good thing," she reassured him. Zilv remained skeptical. The creature radiated an aura of silent calculation, as if gauging his worth. Before he could formulate a response, the bird, Kiwi, suddenly flapped her wings and let out a loud, distinctly human-sounding phrase. "Hello there." A wave of gasps rippled through the class. Some students looked at Nathan in sheer horror. "It can mimic speech," one finally managed to say. Nathan beamed. "Yep, smart little thing, isn't she?" Zilv had to take a moment to process. Humans, it appeared, not only surrounded themselves with predatory creatures, but also ones capable of imitating language. Did these pets understand? Did they listen? The implications were unsettling. It was the snake, however, that proved to be the tipping point. Kaido, unaware of the mounting tension, gently extended his hands, allowing the smooth-bodied reptile to slither forward. "This is just a ball python. Completely harmless." The Zlar fainted on the spot. Pandemonium followed. Students scrambled for the exits, their survival instincts overriding all reason. Some attempted to climb onto higher surfaces, while others chattered in terrified voices, debating whether humans had lost their minds or if this was some elaborate Deathworlder test of dominance. Zilv, observing the scene with the weariness of someone who had seen too much in one day, let out a long, slow exhalation. He turned to the humans, who stood amidst the chaos, their pets wholly unbothered by the commotion. "I believe," Zilv said carefully, "that we may need to establish some guidelines regarding Deathworlder customs." Nathan scratched his head. "So, that's a no on bringing them to the dorms, huh?" Zilv simply buried his face in his appendages. The day was far from over. The classroom had barely recovered from the chaos of the initial encounter. Some students remained perched on elevated platforms, their bodies rigid with tension, while others warily peeked out from behind protective barriers. The Zlar student, still unconscious, was being fanned by a concerned peer whose frilled appendages twitched nervously. Across the room, the humans stood together, their pets still entirely unbothered by the turmoil they had caused. Professor Zilv took a long, deliberate breath, gathering his composure before addressing the class. "It is evident," he began, his voice measured but firm, "that we have encountered a significant cultural divide." Nathan, still scratching his head over the exaggerated response, turned to his parrot, who had been happily preening herself in the aftermath of the commotion. "You really scared them, huh, Kiwi?" The bird ruffled her feathers and let out a cheerful, "Pretty bird." A Zhan student, whose own species was avian in nature, twitched in visible discomfort. That is wrong," they whispered, barely able to look at the parrot. "It speaks without comprehension. It mimics. A creature should not do that." Nathan frowned. "It's just repeating sounds it hears. She's not actually holding a conversation." "That makes it worse," the Zhan muttered, shuddering. Zilv tapped his appendages against his desk, trying to regain control of the discussion. "Humans," he said carefully, "you insist these creatures are harmless. Yet they resemble the most feared predators of many civilizations. How do you expect us to understand this apparent contradiction?" Aaron stepped forward, his dog panting happily at his side. "Because they are harmless. At least to us. Dogs and cats have been domesticated for thousands of years. They aren't wild animals, they're companions. We've shaped their evolution to be part of our society." Anya nodded, absently stroking her cat's head as the feline let out a pleased purr. "They love us, and we love them back. It's a bond, a mutual one. Zill's fronds rippled in unease. Love. You speak of affection towards something that cannot reciprocate in a sentient manner. Why? Kaido, still holding his python, tilted his head as if the answer should have been obvious. Because why wouldn't we? They don't need to be sentient to matter to us. They trust us, and we trust them. That's enough. A clicking noise echoed from the far end of the amphitheater. The Jithrak student, a towering insectoid, shifted uncomfortably. Your species' willingness to place trust in lesser creatures is unsettling, they admitted. On my world, only the strong are valued. Keeping weaker beings close is dangerous. It invites exploitation. Anya raised an eyebrow. Exploitation? They're not slaves. Then what are they? Silence stretched for a moment. Finally, Nathan sighed. Friends. The word settled uncomfortably among the non-human students. The very idea that Deathworlders, already perceived as terrifyingly resilient, would not only tame but befriend creatures that other species instinctively feared. It was incomprehensible. Zill tried a different approach. You say they serve no direct survival function. Yet I have read that some animals on your world assist in hunting, in guarding territory, even in warfare. Is this not true? Aaron hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, but that's not all they do. A lot of people keep pets just because they make life better. They're not tools, and they're not soldiers. They're family. The Zlar student, having regained consciousness but still trembling, finally spoke, their voice weak but insistent. And yet some of them are carnivores. Their gaze flicked toward Anya's cat, who was now grooming one paw with an air of disinterest. You invite predators into your homes? Anya sighed, lifting her feline slightly so the class could see. Predators, sure, but that doesn't mean they're dangerous. Look at her. Does she look like she's hunting right now? The Zlar hesitated. She is small, but her teeth are tiny. Anya smirked. She's not going to eat you. Are you certain? A soft growl rumbled from the cat's throat. Anya winced. Okay, to be fair, she does bite sometimes, but it's usually just a warning. She's never actually hurt me. The Zlar turned a deep shade of blue, which, if Zill recalled correctly, was the color of someone deeply unconvinced. Across the room, Kaido noticed the wary glances directed at his snake and gently coiled it around his wrist, keeping its movements slow and deliberate. Look, I get it. Where you come from, animals like these are probably a threat. But on Earth, we live with them. We evolve together with them. That's why we understand each other. A student from the Varan delegation, a species whose civilization had never interacted with wild ecosystems, narrowed their large, multifaceted eyes. You mean to say you formed a symbiotic relationship with danger itself? Kaido chuckled. That's one way of putting it. Zill's fronds twitched, a mixture of frustration and reluctant fascination. Then perhaps a demonstration is in order. You claim these creatures provide comfort. Can you prove it? Aaron's expression softened. Without a word, he knelt beside his dog, running his fingers gently through its fur. The animal leaned into his touch, tail wagging with slow, easy sways. The tension in Aaron's posture visibly eased, his shoulders relaxing, his expression softening. The room remained silent as the alien students watched. Slowly, the more curious among them leaned forward, their expressions shifting from wariness to something resembling cautious interest. Then, Anya placed a hesitant hand on the desk in front of the Zlar student. You can pet her, she offered. The Zlar recoiled. I would rather not. She's soft. I fail to see how that is relevant. Anya smirked. Come on. Just once. A long pause stretched between them before the Zlar, reluctantly, slowly, extended a trembling limb. With the utmost caution, they brushed the very tips of their fingers against the cat's fur. Their entire body froze. It is warm, they admitted. And a pause. Not entirely unpleasant. Anya grinned. See? We're not crazy. Zilv exhaled, the weight of the day pressing heavily on him. He was not yet convinced that Deathworlders were sane, but he could not deny that they were, at the very least, sincere. He made a note in his records. Further study required. The tension in the classroom had settled. into something fragile, but no longer hostile. Though many of the alien students still kept a wary distance from the humans and their pets, curiosity had begun to eclipse fear. The Zlar student, despite their earlier fainting episode, had yet to withdraw their hand from the cat's fur. Anya watched with amusement as they tentatively stroked her feline's back, their body flashing a pale shade of hesitant contemplation. Progress. Professor Zilv, ever the meticulous observer, tapped his appendages against his desk in thought. "This has been enlightening," he admitted, though his fronds twitched in a manner suggesting mild exhaustion. "I remain unconvinced that such relationships are entirely rational, but I will concede that they are deeply ingrained in Deathworlder psychology." Aaron chuckled as his dog pressed its nose against his palm, seeking attention. "That's one way to put it. Humans are social creatures. We form bonds, even with animals. It's who we are." A low murmur rippled through the gathered students. Some of them were still skeptical, but the absolute terror from earlier had begun to fade. There was an almost tangible shift in the air, the first stirrings of cautious acceptance. Then, without warning, a sharp alarm blared through the classroom. The walls pulsed red, and a voice chimed through the communication system. "Emergency containment breach in hallway 6B, non-essential personnel. Remain in place until further notice." The tension returned in an instant, this time for a very different reason. Zil's fronds flared wide in alarm. "Containment breach? That sector holds the research archives. What could possibly be?" A screeching sound cut through the alarm. Something large. Something alive. The students froze. A second later, the sound of shattering glass echoed through the halls, followed by a guttural, unearthly snarl. Zil's appendages curled inward. Asterisk no asterisk. A Varen student, their multifaceted eyes darting in alarm, clicked in distress. "Professor, is it one of the bio-experiments?" Zil didn't answer immediately. He was already activating his holopad, his fronds curling tighter as he scanned the data. "One of the high-security specimens has escaped." "I don't." His voice cut off as another sound rattled the air. A wet, hacking hiss, something shifting against metal. Nathan, standing closest to the door, turned toward the hallway. "That doesn't sound good." "Your assessment is correct," Zil said grimly. "That is the Othraxis specimen, a highly territorial ambush predator. It was being studied under strict containment protocols. If it has escaped..." He didn't need to finish. The alarm had already warned them enough. A dangerous predator, loose in the halls. For the first time since the lesson began, it was the humans who went rigid with instinctive tension. Nathan exhaled sharply, gaze snapping toward Aaron. "That thing sounds big." "Bigger than us," Aaron confirmed, body shifting into a subtle defensive stance. His dog, having picked up on the sudden shift in the room, lowered itself instinctively, ears pricked forward. Zil flared his fronds in alarm. "We must wait for security forces. Do not engage." But before he could finish, the beast slammed against the outer hallway door. The entire room jolted. The reinforced barrier groaned under the impact. A chittering, warbling screech filled the space between heartbeats. Zil's fronds pulsed with distress. Asterisk remained still, asterisk. The aliens obeyed. But the dog didn't. Before anyone could react, Aaron's canine companion surged forward, body taut with protective instinct. It planted itself between the students and the door, muscles coiled like a drawn wire. A low, rumbling growl rose from its throat, primal and unrelenting. The beast on the other side hesitated. Anya inhaled sharply. It knows something's there. Zil barely processed the words. His focus was locked onto the dog. This creature, this supposedly harmless pet, standing its ground against something that should have reduced it to prey. Then the door shuttered again, and the animal let loose a warning bark so sharp and commanding that even the alien students flinched. Silence. For one long, suspended moment, the hallway beyond remained eerily still. Then, with a final, clicking snarl, the presence on the other side slithered away, retreating down the corridor. A beat passed, then another. The students barely dared to breathe. Finally, The security alert flickered from red to yellow. Containment breach neutralized. All students remain in designated areas until further notice. A collective exhale rippled through the classroom. The humans relaxed. The aliens, still stiff with disbelief, simply stared. Zilv, struggling to find words, settled for the first logical question that came to mind. How? Aaron ruffled his dog's ears, grinning. Predators understand predators. A murmur spread through the alien students. Some of them, for the first time, looked at the pets not with fear, but with something resembling respect. Even the Zlar, who had once fainted at the sight of a snake, regarded the creatures with new eyes. Anya smirked, gently scooping her cat back into her arms. Still think we're crazy? Zilv, after a long pause, let out what could only be interpreted as a resigned sigh. Asterisk less asterisk so. Nathan grinned. That's a start. Across the room, one of the more hesitant students, Dejan, shuffled closer to Aaron's dog. Carefully, with obvious reluctance, they extended a hand. The canine sniffed it once before giving an approving wag of its tail. Dejan hesitated. Then, after a moment of visible deliberation, they pressed their hand lightly against the animal's fur. Their feathers fluffed slightly in surprise. Soft, they murmured. Aaron laughed. Told you. Zilv, watching the scene unfold, made another note in his records. He still had many questions, many concerns, but as he observed his students, humans and aliens alike, taking hesitant steps toward understanding, he allowed himself a quiet moment of acceptance. Perhaps, in the end, the lesson had not been about the pets at all. Perhaps it had been about the humans all along.